Hi, everyone. On the morning of July 17th, 2026, there was a massive landslide as it's being reported. It was actually a massive rockfall, but occurred in Chongqing, China. They're reporting this as southwest China. It looks more like it's south central China to me, but this was along the Wu River and it was utterly devastating. As of this recording here on July 24th, there's been 11 confirmed deaths with approximately 38 people reported as missing. I'm skeptical about those numbers, as we know China typically underreports the consequences of these major disasters. But I want to go over what we know about this episode, what the likely triggers were, and what could be done to avoid such problems in the future. We see this dash cam footage, quite dramatic, showing this massive rock fall. This appears to be limestone bedrock that was exposed along the hillsides that came crashing down. This episode was preceded by a heavy rainfall event where approximately 8 inches of rain fell within a short period of time. And that was no doubt a contributing factor to this disaster. You can see very steep valleys. There's not much flat area along the river for development. And this is the location in China. So you have these massive limestone formations, and limestone tends to form what's called orthogonal joint patterns. So over time, as there's uplift and stress relief, tensile cracks develop in the massive limestone formation. That provides a preferred path for water infiltration to accelerate weathering. And of course, limestone is a type of rock that's deposited in shallow oceans. Based on my research, the limestone here in China that was involved with this rockfall was from the Permian, so roughly 270 million years ago, when most of the Earth's continents were concentrated into single land masses with large inland oceans. And limestone's formed primarily through the accumulation of small shells, carbonate skeletons of small marine organisms, or the chemical precipitation of calcium carbonate in, again, shallow oceans, because the shallow oceans tend to be warmer and promote this marine growth that contributes their skeletons to this deposit. Over time, this preferential weathering along joint patterns in the limestone bedrock can produce quite dramatic landforms. Here's a view of an area in China that has this type of karst topography. You have these sheer cliff faces in the limestone rock. And of course, over time, you get more and more weathering that produces pinnacles of more resistant rock. But you can imagine that the rock had filled in between these pinnacles at one time, and the weathering that it worked through the joint pattern over millions of years would remove all that other rock, the more susceptible to chemical and mechanical weathering, and expose these pinnacles. But this is just a devastatingly massive rockfall, and it looked like it just completely took out multiple multi-unit apartment buildings. China mobilized upwards of 800 rescue personnel, and unfortunately, I think it's going to be primarily a recovery operation, although they did rescue reportedly 11 people. And the only warning that this massive rockfall was about to occur was about an hour beforehand, when boulders were seen falling down onto the roadway. So it appears that there wasn't any active monitoring going on of this slope that could have provided an early warning system to these people to get out of the area. But you could just see that there's just not a lot of flat area to provide room for commercial development along the Wu River here. And so why rain, a lot of rain would precipitate an event like this, is that water would fill these joints, typically orthogonal joints in the rock, and it would increase the pore water pressure in the rock and essentially act like a hydraulic piston where it would force the rock apart. But in actuality, the high water pressures, pore water pressures, would reduce the friction between the surfaces of the limestone along these joints. So you reduce the strength of the rock mass by introducing high pore water pressures through rainfall. And I think they've got a bigger problem on their hands because they've got similar rock formations all throughout this town. And again, this is not a landslide per se. Landslide you would think of involving unconsolidated soil and rock that moves rapidly down slope. This was a massive rock that simply collapsed by all appearances. And you could just see from this picture looking down the river that they're likely to have concerns with many other areas in terms of instability of the limestone rock mass. Now, China, of course, is no stranger to massive rock falls and landslides. This occurred November 11th, 2025, where a massive landslide took out a bridge that had recently been constructed. This was near the Tibet border. Completely destroyed this bridge, which since that time has not been rebuilt. This, again, is an example of unfavorable site conditions and an inadequate characterization of the geologic and geotechnical hazards. People have to live in a variety of areas faced with different types of geotechnical and geologic hazards, but living directly below massively fractured limestone rock that tends to form sheer or near vertical surfaces is essentially like having a sword hanging over your head at all times, you're not knowing when it's going to drop. Now, to address what could have been done here, obviously don't build in such high hazard areas to begin with, which is easier said than done in China because they have really high population densities. They don't have that many favorable locations for development. So there's a lot of development pressure to build out in these areas anyway. You can have examples of landslides threatening towns. This is a town that's about 500 years old in Switzerland. I did a video about this a while back where this massive ongoing landslide started encroaching on the town itself. And I done a couple of videos about it. My most recent video, and I've got a link in the description, involved the value space doing a satellite-based INSAR analysis to define the areas and the magnitudes of the slope movement. And I think that's what the Chinese officials here need to utilize is when you have a very large area that you need to do some initial screening or early warning monitoring of, these satellite tools where you can detect small changes in the ground surface elevation, detect movement down to the millimeter scale, so a fraction of an inch, is quite useful to provide an assessment of high-risk areas as well as to provide early warning to people in an area where a mass movement is about to occur. So if there are any updates on this story, I'll be sure to do update videos. With that, I want to send a shout out to those of you who've contributed to buy me a coffee. That's one of the better ways to support this channel. I also want to thank the channel members who typically get to preview these videos a day or more in advance. And I also want to thank those of you who have left comments and have contributed to Super Thanks. So stay tuned, everyone.